Have you ever felt trapped inside your own head, where every thought seems like an enemy? You walk through the day with a steady face, yet behind that calm exterior, storms of doubt, regret, and self-criticism keep striking. It's a strange kind of prison, built not by the world outside, but by the whispers inside. I know that weight because every person who has fought to stay strong has carried it at some point. The mind can be both a sanctuary and a battlefield. Left unchecked, it becomes ruthless, turning your own strength into a weapon against you. But this is not the end of your story. The Stoics, those warriors of the inner life, faced the same shadows. Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca. They all knew the sting of despair, the pull of weakness, the urge to believe the lies of the mind. And yet, they discovered a way to break free. Not by escaping life, but by mastering the way they thought about it. These 9 brutal laws are not gentle comforts. They are iron rules, forged in hardship, meant to strip away illusions and expose the raw truth. They will demand honesty, discipline, and courage. But if you are willing to face them, they can dissolve the chains of negative thinking and lead you back to clarity, freedom, and peace. So, let me ask you, are you ready to confront the voice that has been holding you back? If you are, then stay with me. Because once you learn these laws, the grip of darkness begins to loosen, and you'll realize the strongest prison door was never locked. As we step into the first chapter, picture this. You're lying in bed at night, eyes open, the ceiling above you, nothing more than a screen where the same memory keeps playing on repeat. A conversation you wish had gone differently, a decision you regret, a betrayal that still burns. You whisper silently to yourself, it shouldn't have happened. And yet, it did. The world outside has long gone quiet, but inside your chest there is no peace. Every detail replays, sharper each time, as if your mind believes that sheer resistance can rewrite the past. You argue with what has already unfolded, like a man shouting at the ocean, demanding the waves roll back. But the tide does not care. It never has. Now imagine this. 2 people caught in the same storm. The first stands in the rain, fists raised, screaming at the sky. This isn't fair. The second pulls a hood over his head and begins to walk. The storm does not choose favorites. It soaks them both. But the one who resists suffers twice, first from the rain, then from the refusal to accept it. That is what arguing with reality feels like. The pain itself is heavy, but it is our denial that makes it unbearable. The Stoics saw this with piercing clarity. They didn't tell us to enjoy pain or to pretend we are unbothered. They offered something far sharper. The wisdom to see that suffering often comes not from the event, but from our judgment of the event. Epictetus, the former slave who became one of the great teachers of freedom, left us a line that cuts straight to the heart. Do not seek to have events happen as you wish, but wish them to happen as they do happen, and your life will go well. At first, these words sound like surrender. But listen again. They are not the words of weakness. They are the call of a man who refuses to fight battles that cannot be won. To align with what is, not with the fantasy of what should have been. That is not numbness. That is reality. Think back to a heartbreak. Perhaps someone you trusted walked away, leaving you to gather the pieces of a life that no longer felt whole. The mind whispers, if only they had stayed. If only I had done more. These thoughts loop endlessly, not because the leaving itself destroyed you, but because you resist the truth that they are gone. Or think of failure, the exam you missed, the job you lost, the chance you squandered. The memory is sharp, but what sharpens it most is the belief that it should not have occurred. This is the hidden root of much of our misery, not the betrayal itself, but the belief that betrayal should never have touched us. Not the failure, but the refusal to accept that failure is part of the human script. Reality unfolds without asking our permission. And every time we demand it be different, we hand over our peace as ransom. Marcus Aurelius, burdened with the weight of ruling an empire, wrote in his private journal something that should be carved into the heart of every person. Love the hand that fate deals you and play it as your own, for what could be more fitting? This is what the Stoics called amor fati, the love of fate. Not the naive celebration of pain, but the radical act of claiming every circumstance as fuel for growth. Let me tell you a story. A man I once knew lost his business in a sudden economic downturn. Overnight, years of labor collapsed into debt and silence. He spent months raging against the system, against the unfairness, against every imagined villain. His health declined. His nights were endless battles with ghosts he could never defeat. And then, one day, he stopped. He looked at his life not as something stolen from him, but as something handed back to him raw and unformed. From that day forward, his question was no longer, "Why me?" but "What now?" He built again, slower, wiser, leaner. And though he never regained what he lost, he found something greater: clarity, freedom, and a strange, unshakable peace. That is what happens when we stop arguing with reality. Energy once wasted in denial becomes energy for creation. The fight with the past ends, and the shaping of the present begins. Ask yourself, how much of your suffering is not from the event itself, but from the thought that it should not have happened? How many sleepless nights have you given to shadows that will never change? How many storms have you endured twice, once in the body, once in the mind? Life will hand you both roses and thorns. You cannot demand only the fragrance without the cuts. But you can decide whether to bleed endlessly from scratching at what cannot be undone. The Stoics invite us to stand still, to let reality be what it is, and to meet it with steady eyes. Seneca once said, "We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more in imagination than in reality." That is the essence of this law. The thing itself is rarely as unbearable as the war we wage against it. So here is the shift. When the exam is failed, do not collapse. Ask instead, what is this teaching me? When the relationship ends, do not spiral into self-blame. Ask, what strength can be built here? When the opportunity slips away, do not mourn forever. Ask, what doors open now that this one is closed? None of this is instant. It is not magic. It is practice. But every time you shift from resistance to response, from arguing to acting, you grow lighter, stronger, wiser. The storm still comes, but now you move through it with the calm of one who knows the rain cannot break stone. Remember this: you do not need a perfect life to have peace. You only need the courage to meet life on its own terms. Reality is not your enemy. Every hardship is a forge. So stop arguing with reality. It is a battle you cannot win, and you don't need to. Lay down the burden of resistance. Lift your eyes to what is in front of you, and with the heart of a Stoic, ask the only question that matters. What will I do with this now? That is where freedom begins. Moving into the second chapter, let me paint you a picture. Imagine walking into a crowded room filled with smoke. At first you cough, your eyes sting, your body resists. But if you sit there long enough, something strange happens. You stop noticing. The air is still poisoned, but you've grown used to breathing it in. That is what happens to the mind when it lives too long in toxic environments. Think about it. No one is born drowning in self-doubt. No one enters the world whispering to themselves that they're unworthy. These voices are learned. They are planted, watered, and nurtured by what surrounds us. Every cynical remark from a friend, every endless scroll through lives that look perfect, every habit of clutter and chaos, we absorb them until they sound like our own thoughts. The mind is not an island. It is a mirror. And what it reflects depends entirely on what we place before it. Now ask yourself, what do you sit in every day? If your ears are filled with noise, your thoughts will echo that noise. If you linger in drama, your inner voice will grow suspicious and fearful. If you surround yourself with cynics, soon you'll begin to doubt the goodness in yourself and in everyone else. There is no neutral ground. Your environment is either healing you or harming you. It builds you or it breaks you. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher who lived through the corruption of Roman courts and the whispers of palace intrigue, gave us a timeless warning. Associate with people who are likely to improve you. Welcome those whom you yourself can improve. He wasn't talking about comfort. He wasn't telling us to find easy company. He was urging us to curate what enters the sacred space of our minds. Just as you would not step into a room filled with poison and expect your lungs to remain pure, you cannot stay in unhealthy environments and expect your thoughts to stay clear. Here's where it becomes real. I knew a man who carried constant anxiety with him like a second skin. He thought it was just who he was, some flaw woven into his DNA. But when he finally looked around, he saw the pattern. His closest friend spoke only in complaints, mocking others, pulling every conversation toward bitterness. His evenings were filled with news feeds, screaming catastrophe, social media showing him endless proof of what he lacked. Even his room was cluttered, his desk a battlefield of unfinished work, his phone buzzing with static from dawn until midnight. He didn't realize it, but he was feeding the very thoughts that tormented him. Once he began to change his environment, unfollowing, cleaning, choosing different voices, the shift was undeniable. The storm inside him quieted, not because he conquered it directly, but because he stopped fueling it. This is the principle the Stoics lived by. They understood that philosophy was not an exercise of theory, but of design. Their lives were structured with simplicity, their habits pared down, their interactions meaningful, not because they were cold or distant, but because they recognized this truth. What surrounds you enters you, and once it enters you, it shapes your choices. Marcus Aurelius, in his private reflections, wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." But look deeper. What colors those thoughts to begin with? The pigments come from outside, the voices, the spaces, the energy we consume without question. So let's make this practical. Who around you drains your energy every time they speak? Who leaves you restless, uncertain, or quietly diminished? On the other hand, who steadies you? Who makes you braver simply by their presence? And what about the spaces you live in? Does your room give you clarity or confusion? Does your desk invite focus or feed distraction? These questions may sound small, but they hold power. Because you cannot kill negative thoughts while feeding them every day. You cannot expect peace if you are constantly bathing in noise. Let me give you another picture. Imagine placing a bowl of clear water in a dusty room. Leave it there for a day, untouched. When you return, the surface is clouded, the clarity gone. That is your mind in a polluted environment. Stillness cannot survive in chaos. This is why the Stoic path is not merely about endurance, but about cultivation. It is a disciplined practice of guarding the gates of the mind. Epictetus reminded his students daily that while we cannot control the world, we can control what we allow to shape us. That is our responsibility. That is our power. So here is a challenge, a 7-day experiment in reclaiming your mind. For 1 week, refuse to engage in gossip. Do not lend your energy to drama that is not yours. Resist the urge to scroll endlessly through curated lives that exist only to trigger your insecurity. Clean your room. Literally, clear your desk. Light a candle at night instead of staring at a glowing screen. Read something that nourishes. Call someone who speaks about growth instead of complaints. At first, you will feel resistance. Your mind will crave the chaos it has grown addicted to, the way lungs crave smoke after years of inhaling it. But stay the course, because one day soon you will pause and notice something remarkable: silence. Not because your thoughts have magically vanished, but because you have stopped feeding the storm. And in that quiet space you will hear a voice you may have forgotten, your own. Remember this: your outer world is shaping your inner world, whether you are aware of it or not. There is no escape from this truth. The question is not whether you are influenced, but by what. And the moment you take responsibility for that answer, you begin to reclaim your freedom. So guard your environment as you would guard your most precious possession. Because in truth, it is. The mind is the workshop where your life is forged. Protect it from corrosion, and it will build you into something unshakable. Allow it to be poisoned, and it will collapse no matter how strong you appear on the surface. At this stage, the lesson is simple but uncompromising. You cannot rise above your surroundings unless you choose them with intention. The path of the Stoic is not to withdraw from the world, but to curate what enters. And once you do, you'll find that peace is not a distant dream. It's the natural state of a mind no longer drowning in noise. So stop waiting for clarity to arrive on its own. Build it, shape it, protect it. Because what surrounds you does not stay outside, it becomes you. And from here, we step into the next truth, a truth about how discipline of thought is not enough without discipline of action, and why the battle for your mind is always fought first in the choices you make each day. Advancing to the 3rd chapter, let me bring you into a restless night. The kind where the room is silent, but your mind is louder than thunder. You toss, you turn, and the same sentences replay like a broken record. I'm not enough. I'll fail. I'm broken. You try to bury the sound, but the more you fight it, the stronger it grows. And then, in the darkness, a dangerous thing happens. A part of you begins to believe it. But here's where the truth cuts through like a blade. You are not your thoughts. That single sentence has the power to break chains you didn't even know you were wearing. Most of us live as if every thought is a reflection of who we are, as if every whisper in the mind is a decree carved in stone. But it isn't. A thought is not a verdict. It is only a visitor. The Stoics knew this long before modern psychology gave it a name. To them, the mind was not a mirror of truth, but a battleground where impressions, fears, and emotions fought for dominance. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor who carried both crown and burden, left us words that remain urgent even now. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. He was reminding himself, because his journal was never meant for us, that the noise inside does not equal the truth inside. Here's an image for you. The mind is a vast sky, and thoughts are clouds passing through. Some are light and harmless. Some are heavy and storm-filled. But none of them are the sky itself. If you believed every cloud was permanent, you'd never see the sun again. And yet, this is how most people live, treating every thought as an eternal truth rather than a temporary formation. Let's get practical. Suppose your mind says, "I'm a failure." If you swallow it whole, you wear it like a name tag. It shapes how you move, how you speak, how you see yourself. But try a shift in language. Instead of "I'm a failure," say, "I'm having the thought that I'm a failure." It seems small, almost trivial, but that single adjustment creates distance. Suddenly the thought is not you, it is something you are noticing, and once there is space, there is power. Think of it like a courtroom. Write the thought down, stare at it on paper, not swirling inside your head. Ask yourself, is this 100% true? What evidence do I really have? What would Marcus Aurelius say to this accusation? Will this matter in 5 years? Almost always the thought collapses under the weight of its own weakness. You discover it was not a solid wall, only a fog, and fog cannot hold you. Let me tell you a story. A woman I once spoke to described her mornings as battles. Before she even touched the floor, her thoughts would begin. You're behind. You'll never catch up. You're failing your family, your job, your life. For years, she believed those words were her identity. But when she started practicing this separation, writing, questioning, labeling them as just thoughts, her world shifted. The voices didn't vanish overnight, but they lost their power. She said it was like discovering she'd been living in a theater, mistaking the play for reality. Once she stepped back into the audience, she saw it for what it was, a performance, not the truth. Epictetus taught his students something radical. Impressions come to us uninvited, but it is our assent that gives them power. In other words, the thought itself cannot harm you. Only when you nod in agreement, only when you fuse it with your identity, does it cut deep. This is why the Stoics trained daily to notice thoughts as they arose, to question them before letting them in, the way a guard questions a stranger at the gate. Here's another image. Think of your mind as a radio. Stations flip on their own, sometimes music, sometimes static, sometimes a voice you don't like. Just because a sad song plays does not mean you have to sing along. Just because a cruel message comes through does not mean you have to live by it. You are the listener, not the broadcast. And here's the deeper truth. You are not the tremor. You are the ground that holds firm beneath it. The clouds, the thunder, the downpour, they may obscure your view, but the mountain remains unmoved. That is you. Does this mean you can control every thought? No. Control is the illusion that keeps people chained. The Stoic practice is not about forcing silence, but about becoming the observer. Watch the clouds drift by. Let the storm pass without building a shelter out of it. The goal is not suppression, it is recognition. I remember once being consumed by a thought that I had ruined everything. A single mistake, and my mind wrote an entire script of catastrophe. But when I stopped fighting it, when I simply noted, there's that thought again, it lost its teeth. It was like looking a shadow in the eye and realizing it had no substance. And in that space, clarity returned. This is why journaling was central to Stoic practice. Writing is not just a habit, it is a form of defense. To write a thought down is to pull it out of the shadows and into the light. Marcus did it nightly. Seneca did it in his letters. They turned their minds inside out so they could see the tricks it was playing. You can do the same. So let's bring it back to you. Tonight, when a thought comes whispering in the dark, you're broken. you're not enough. You'll fail. Pause. Don't fight it. Don't argue with it. Observe it. Say to yourself, I'm having the thought that I am broken. That simple act will feel like stepping back from the edge of a cliff. Suddenly you are not dangling. You are standing on solid ground. Because here is the liberating secret. You are not the thought. You are the thinker. You are not the broadcast. You are the listener. You are not the storm. You are the mountain. And when the storm clears, and it always does, you will see what was true all along. You are still here, still whole, still unshaken. Now take a breath. Let this truth settle deep into you. Because once you grasp that you're not your thoughts, you reclaim the steering wheel of your life. The fog will still drift in, but now you know it is only fog. And you, steady as the sky, remain untouched. This is where peace begins, not by silencing the mind, but by no longer confusing the noise for the self. And from here, we move into an even sharper reality, the reminder that time itself is limited. And when you truly see how brief this life is, you stop wasting it on shadows that were never you in the first place. Entering the fourth chapter, picture a man walking through his days as if the clock above his head will never strike its final note. He fills his hours with grudges, gossip, endless distractions. He delays his dreams, postpones the words he should speak, hoards his love, as if there will always be another chance to give it. But one truth hovers above him silently, waiting. Tomorrow is not promised. Now imagine this. You are furious because someone insulted you. In the moment it feels unbearable, like the world has shrunk to nothing but that wound. Yet pause. Ask yourself, if I had only 1 week left to live, would this matter? Almost always the answer strips the insult down to nothing. It dissolves into smoke. And what remains is not anger, but perspective. The Stoics carried a phrase that kept their vision sharp: memento mori, remember death. At first it sounds dark, even grim. But look again, it is not an invitation to despair. It is a summons to live. To strip away the illusion of permanence and face what is real. Death is not the enemy. Forgetting death is. Because when you forget it, you begin wasting your days on what drains you instead of what defines you. Seneca once wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." Those words sting because they are true. Time is not endless. It is the most sacred resource we will ever hold. And unlike money, unlike possessions, once spent, it can never be reclaimed. Every sunrise you witness is not a guarantee. It is a gift. Think of your own life. How many days have been sacrificed to arguments that never mattered? How many hours dissolved into overthinking that solved nothing? How many moments of beauty were ignored because you were replaying some petty conflict in your mind? This is the quiet tragedy of forgetting death. We live as if we will live forever, and so we waste the only forever we actually have, which is this moment. Here's a story. A friend of mine once lost his father suddenly, without warning. One day he was there, the next he was gone. For months afterward, my friend would replay every conversation, every missed call, every opportunity he delayed. He realized he had been living under the illusion of infinite tomorrows, assuming he would always have another day to make things right. That illusion shattered overnight, and in its place came a fierce clarity. He began living differently, not out of fear of dying, but out of gratitude for the time that remained. He forgave faster. He spoke his heart without waiting. He began to see every day as a fragile but priceless gift. That is the power of memento mori. Marcus Aurelius carried this awareness like armor. He reminded himself, you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. He was not trying to frighten himself. He was training his focus. If death could arrive at any moment, then only a fool would spend his days in bitterness, resentment, or endless delay. Think of the freedom this gives. When you remember that your time is finite, grudges lose their grip. You release them, not because the other person deserves forgiveness, but because your peace does. When you remember that the end is certain, you stop postponing your dreams. You move, you act, you speak, because the luxury of delay no longer exists. And when you remember that death shadows every step, you stop hoarding love. You give it freely, urgently, without embarrassment, because you know the window to give it is short. Make this a daily practice. Each morning, whisper to yourself, "I might not get this day again." Let those words guide your choices. Do not waste them on battles unworthy of your spirit. Pour them into what matters, into the people you love, into the work that gives you purpose, into the quiet moments that make life radiant. It changes the way you walk through the world. A cluttered mind filled with worry becomes unbearable when you know time is short. Self-pity loses its sweetness. Gossip sounds hollow. Petty conflicts collapse under their own smallness. Remembering death strips away everything that does not matter, like fire refining gold. What remains is only what is essential. At this stage, the challenge is clear. Let the reality of death be your filter. Hold every decision up to it. Ask yourself, if my time were nearly gone, would this still matter? If the answer is yes, give it your full heart. If the answer is no, walk away without guilt. Because here is the paradox. The more you remember death, the more alive you become. You stop drifting. You stop wasting. You live with urgency, but without desperation, with focus, but without fear. Death is the sharp edge that carves away the noise and leaves only what is real. And so, as you carry this law into your days, make it personal. Speak it aloud if you must. Whisper it in silence if that feels truer. I remember death to live fully. Let it not haunt you, but awaken you. For in remembering the brevity of life, you reclaim the richness of living. And from here, we move toward an even deeper truth. Because once you see that time is short, the next question becomes inevitable. What will you do with the time that is left? At this stage, let me ask you a question that might sting. How many of your days have been wasted trying to read someone else's mind? How many nights have you replayed a comment, a glance, a silence, twisting it over and over, as if decoding it would finally give you peace? You wear a smile in the daylight, but inside you're tied up in invisible strings, pulled in every direction by the need to be liked. Now pause. What if I told you that approval was never yours to control? What if I told you the only thing you can ever truly command is the kind of person you decide to be? The truth is, most people live like prisoners. Not prisoners behind bars, but prisoners inside their own heads, trapped by the opinions of strangers, friends, even family. Every thought bends toward the same questions. Do they like me? Am I enough? What will they say? And with every question, the chains tighten. Here is where Stoicism turns the world upside down. The Stoics whisper a truth that feels almost rebellious in today's culture. Don't seek to be liked, seek to be good. Not good in the sense of pleasing others, but good in the sense of virtue. Anchored, uncompromising, true to yourself, even if no one claps. Epictetus, born into slavery and rising to become one of the greatest voices in philosophy, delivered this challenge with cutting clarity. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. At first, those words sting. Who wants to be seen as foolish? Who wants to be dismissed? But Epictetus knew what few dare to admit, that the path to greatness requires the courage to look small in the eyes of others, to choose virtue over validation. And yes, that choice has a price. Some will laugh, some will doubt you, some will dismiss you with a smirk, but their laughter, their doubt, their dismissal, none of it has power over a soul anchored in what is right. Their opinion is only wind. Today it carries warm breezes of praise. Tomorrow it chills with criticism. If your peace depends on that wind, you will forever be tossed around like a ship without an anchor. Think of your own life. How many times have you held back a truth for fear of rejection? How many times have you betrayed yourself with silence just to win a nod of approval? Each time the applause fades, but the cost remains. Because the moment you live by the opinions of others, you abandon the only thing that is ever truly yours, your character. The Stoics remind us, when you live by values, you become unshakable. Honesty, courage, kindness. These are not abstract ideals, they are anchors. When you stand on them, you can walk into any room without fear. Even if no one applauds, you still stand tall. Let me tell you a story. A young man once sought to rise in politics. He studied hard, spoke well, dressed sharply, but every step of his campaign was haunted by one obsession. What will they think of me? Every criticism cut him down. Every rumor left him sleepless, until an older mentor said to him, "You are aiming at the wrong target. Don't aim at being liked. Aim at being worthy of respect, even if that respect never comes." The advice struck him like lightning. Slowly, he shifted. He started making decisions not based on popularity, but on principle. Some rejected him, others mocked him, but those who followed deeply, because people can sense when you are no longer a puppet. So here is the question you must ask yourself. Am I living by virtue, or am I chasing approval? When someone rejects you, don't ask, "Why don't they want me?" Ask instead, "Did I stay true to who I am?" That is all you can control. And in the end, it is all that matters. If you want to make this real, try a simple exercise. Take a sheet of paper. Write down 3 core virtues, the principles you want to live by, no matter who approves. Place them where you can see them each morning. Let them shape your words, your choices, your reactions. Over time, you'll notice something subtle but profound. The noise of other people's opinions begins to fade. In its place rises the steady voice of your own inner code. Because when you choose virtue over validation, you stop living like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. You stop waiting for someone else's applause to feel whole. You begin to live as the author of your own story. And that is where freedom begins. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, "Be satisfied if the smallest thing goes well, and consider even this a rare achievement." He knew the world would rarely approve, rarely applaud. But he also knew that living by virtue, not by praise, was the only road to peace. So let me leave you with a challenge. This week, when the temptation for approval rises, when you feel the pull of those invisible strings, pause. Ask yourself, am I serving virtue or am I serving vanity? And then choose the harder road, the road of character. If this message stirred something inside you, anchor it now. Write in the comments just one word, virtue. Let that word be a declaration, a reminder that you are done living for applause. And if you want to keep sharpening this path, subscribe and stay with us. Not for validation, but for strength. For the discipline to keep choosing the right thing, even when no one is watching. Because in the end, when the crowd goes silent, only one question will remain. Did you live true? And from here, we step forward to the next law, where the battle moves from the craving of validation to the deeper test of discipline, the quiet strength that decides every victory of the mind. From here, let us walk into one of the most deceptive traps of the mind. It is not always the blow that breaks you, but the echo that follows it. Not the event itself, but the story you wrap around it like barbed wire until you bleed. Now imagine this. You receive a message, one you hoped would be warm, but it's blunt, maybe even cold. Or worse, no reply at all. The fact is small, just words on a screen, or silence where words should be. But your mind doesn't leave it there. It sharpens the edges. They're ignoring me. They don't care. I must not matter. The fact is one thing, the story is another, and it is the story that cuts deepest. Marcus Aurelius, who bore the weight of an empire, once wrote, "If you are pained by any external thing, it is not this thing that disturbs you, but your estimate of it." He was pointing to the gap, the dangerous space between what happens and what we decide it means. The raw event is often neutral. It's our interpretation that gives it teeth. Think of rejection. Someone turns you down. That is the fact. Yet your mind whispers, "No one will ever love me. I'll be alone forever." That's not truth. That's a story. Or failure. You stumble. You make a mistake. The fact is simple, but the voice inside hisses, "I'm worthless. I'll never succeed." Again, not truth. A story. And here's the brutal reality. Your mind is not an impartial narrator. It is a playwright fueled by old wounds, long-standing fears, and insecurities that have lingered for years. A curt word from a boss becomes, "They hate me." A delayed text becomes, "They've abandoned me." The fact remains small. The story towers over it, casting shadows that choke the light out of your peace. I once knew someone who carried this burden daily. A friend's silence was never just silence. To her, it meant betrayal. A single mistake at work was not a mistake. It was proof she was incompetent. Her suffering grew not from the facts themselves, but from the endless stories she stitched around them. Only when she began writing them down did she see the difference. On one side of the page, the raw fact. On the other side, the story her mind had invented. It was a revelation. Most of what tormented her wasn't real. It was fiction. This is why Stoicism calls for the separation of event from story. It is a discipline of clarity, a stripping away of emotional static so you can hear what is true. Here's how it works. Step 1. Write down the fact. Pure, uncolored. My message hasn't been answered in 2 days. Step 2. Write down the story your mind is telling. They're ignoring me. They don't care. Step 3. Question it. Is this definitely true? Could there be another reason? In that pause, you reclaim power. You realize thoughts are not commandments. They are drafts, and drafts can be rewritten. This practice may feel small, but it is a blade against suffering. Because once you catch the difference between fact and story, you see that pain multiplies only when you let the mind run unchecked. Seneca once said, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Look closely, and you'll see he was not exaggerating. Most of the torment you carry is imagined, born from unchecked narratives, not from life itself. So how do you begin to free yourself? Pause when the spiral begins. Investigate the story. Ask the hard questions. Is this true? Will this matter in 5 years? Is this the only interpretation? By doing this, you stop the snowball before it becomes an avalanche. You interrupt the chain reaction of suffering. Let's ground this in a simple example. A colleague walks past without greeting you. The fact, they walked past. The story. They dislike me. I must have done something wrong. Yet pause. What else could be true? Perhaps they were distracted. Perhaps they were carrying their own burden. Perhaps it had nothing to do with you at all. Suddenly, the weight you felt begins to crumble. You were not rejected. You were simply standing in the path of another person's storm. This is not about lying to yourself. It is not about painting everything in false positivity. It is about accuracy, about refusing to hand your piece to the first story your mind offers. Because your mind will always offer the darkest interpretation first. It is wired to. But you are not required to accept it. Here's the deeper truth. You will never control every circumstance life throws at you. People will still walk away. Plans will still fail. Mistakes will still sting. But you can always control the meaning you give those moments. And when you control the meaning, you strip away their power to wound you beyond the initial sting. Think of it like this. Life throws a spark. That spark is the fact. What happens next, whether it fizzles harmlessly or burns into wildfire, depends entirely on the story you tell yourself about it. Every time you choose a calmer, truer narrative, you step closer to the freedom the Stoics spoke of. The freedom that comes when your peace is no longer hostage to events, but anchored in your own judgment. You become the one who decides whether the story is tragedy or triumph. And so, let me leave you with this reminder. You do not have to keep living inside stories that wound you. You can tell better ones. You can rewrite them. Each time you pause, question, and choose differently, you loosen the chains your mind once wrapped around you. This is not just philosophy. It is survival. It is freedom. It is the difference between a life lived as a victim of your own thoughts and a life lived as the author of your own meaning. And from here, we turn to the next lesson, where the focus shifts from rewriting stories to mastering the habits of discipline, because clarity alone is not enough. Without disciplined action, even the best stories collapse. Advancing to the 7th chapter, let us begin with an image. Picture yourself in a dark tunnel, walking for hours with nothing but shadows pressing in on every side. The more you stare at the darkness, the more you feel it swallowing you whole. But then, a single candle is lit. Small, almost fragile, yet it changes everything. Gratitude is that candle. It does not erase the tunnel, but it reminds you there is light, and that light is enough to move forward. Now imagine your own mind when negativity takes hold. It clings to what is missing, what you lack, what you have not achieved. It whispers that you are behind, empty, unworthy. In that narrow tunnel of focus, despair grows like weeds, choking out everything else. Gratitude does not pretend the weeds are gone. It simply refuses to water them. It redirects your attention to what still blooms, to what still stands, to what is already here. Seneca, who watched the fragile wealth of Rome rise and fall, captured it in one sentence. It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor. His warning cuts across centuries. Poverty is not measured by the absence of possessions, but by the blindness to what is already in your hands. Think about the last time you were consumed by a problem. Maybe it was a bill unpaid, a friendship strained, a mistake that felt unforgivable. Problems demand attention. They scream, they claw, they pull you into their gravity until all you can see is them. Gratitude is the force that widens the frame. It reminds you that life is larger than this one issue. You are not defined by the problem, only distracted by it. And when you shift the frame, you regain the ground beneath your feet. A friend once told me about a season when everything seemed to collapse: his health, his career, his marriage. He was drowning in negativity. But one evening, sitting alone at his kitchen table, he forced himself to write down 3 small things he was grateful for. At first, it felt hollow. Then it felt defiant. Within weeks, that list grew. Sunlight through the window, the sound of laughter from his child, the comfort of hot tea. His problems did not vanish, but they lost their ability to dictate every thought. Gratitude gave him a battlefield he could fight on, instead of a graveyard he was buried in. This is the secret power of gratitude. It is not soft. It is not passive. It is defiance. It is the strength to say, yes, this hurts, but I still choose to see what is here. That choice does not dismiss suffering. It sharpens resilience. The opposite of gratitude is not anger or sadness. It is forgetfulness, forgetting the battles you survived, forgetting the hands that lifted you, forgetting the mornings you once prayed for and now live inside. When you forget, negativity thrives. It finds the perfect soil in the blind spot of memory. That is why gratitude must be ritual, not accident. Make it small. Write down 3 things each morning or night. Not grand victories, those are rare. Instead, name the quiet mercies. A deep breath, a warm meal, the way the rain sounds against the window. These are not trivial, they are anchors. Because when the storm arrives and life guarantees storms, those small anchors keep you from being swept away. Think of it like standing in the ocean. The waves of overthinking, doubt, and fear rise higher, pulling you under. Gratitude is the rope tied to the shore. It does not stop the waves, but it holds you steady until the waters calm. Marcus Aurelius once reminded himself, "Do not imagine that something is impossible because you find it hard. For with discipline, even the hardest becomes possible." Gratitude is such a discipline. It does not always come naturally. Some days it feels forced. But with practice, it reshapes the terrain of your mind until negativity no longer finds a home. Here's a simple truth that many forget. The very fact that you are aware of your negative thoughts is proof you are already on the path to healing. Awareness itself is the first cut into the root of despair. You are doing better than you think, not because life is flawless, but because you have begun the work of change. Gratitude deepens that cut. It severs negativity from its soil and replaces it with life. I recall a woman who battled years of anxiety. Every setback became proof of her inadequacy. But when she began keeping a gratitude journal, something remarkable happened. She didn't suddenly stop feeling anxious, but the anxiety no longer defined her. Gratitude became her rebellion, her refusal to let fear write the final chapter. So, let me leave you with this. Gratitude is not weakness. It is not wishful thinking. It is a weapon. A sharp, deliberate strike against the poison of negativity. Each time you practice it, you widen the tunnel, you steady the ground, you tether yourself to what is real and enduring. And when the next storm comes, and it will, you will have something stronger than denial. You will have memory. You will have presence. You will have the strength to say, I may not have everything, but I am not empty-handed. I have enough to keep walking. This is where negativity dies, not in pretending the dark doesn't exist, but in refusing to forget the light that does. And from here, we turn to the next truth, because sometimes it isn't your mind that is broken. Sometimes you are simply tired, and knowing the difference between the two can change everything. As we step into the 8th chapter, let me speak to the nights when you have stared at the ceiling, dissecting every thought, every feeling, as if somewhere in the chaos you might uncover proof that you are weak, flawed, or broken beyond repair. You search for an answer that never arrives because you are asking the wrong question. Now imagine this: a warrior returning from battle, armor dented, muscles aching, eyes heavy. He collapses to the ground, unable to rise. Would you call him broken, or simply tired from the fight? Most of us confuse exhaustion with weakness. We treat fatigue as evidence that something is permanently wrong with us, when in truth, it is only a signal that too much has been poured out, too quickly, without being replenished. Fatigue is cunning. It disguises itself as failure. When you are drained, the world itself changes shape. Simple tasks feel impossible. Small setbacks feel catastrophic. Conversations twist into accusations that were never spoken. You start misreading messages, replaying words until they darken into something heavier than reality. You begin to believe that people are against you, not because they are, but because exhaustion has turned your mind into a storm. And storms do not form because the sky is weak. They form when the air has been stirred for too long, when pressure has been building without relief. The mind is no different. Negativity multiplies not because you are broken, but because you are depleted. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself often, the mind must be given relaxation. It will rise improved and sharper after a pause. Even an emperor carrying the weight of an empire knew this truth. You cannot command clarity from a body that is collapsing. The mistake many of us make is declaring war on our thoughts, as though they are enemies to be crushed. But when your body and spirit are running on fumes, clarity cannot bloom. You cannot expect a field to yield crops if you never allow it to rest. Soil must be renewed, so must you. Think of the ways you starve yourself without realizing it. Sleep sacrificed night after night, meals rushed or neglected, bodies left stagnant in chairs, minds drowned in endless scrolls of noise. Then we wonder why our thoughts twist into knots, why despair lurks at the edge of every shadow. The answer is not to push harder. The answer is to pause. I once knew a woman who insisted on perfection in all things. She worked until midnight, fueled by coffee and willpower, convinced that slowing down was weakness. When her body finally broke down, she spiraled into shame, believing she was unworthy because she could not keep up. Only when she began to rest, really rest, did she see the truth. Her problem was never weakness. It was exhaustion. Within weeks of better sleep, walking outside, eating with intention, her mind cleared. The storm faded. She discovered she had been carrying strength all along. Here is the lesson. You are not a machine to be fixed. You are a living being that must be renewed. Rest is not indulgence. It is strategy. It is how you return to yourself. Tonight, give yourself permission to stop. Go to bed earlier than you think you should. Let the world wait. Take a walk without your phone, letting your senses breathe without interruption. Say no to one demand that drains you, even if the word no feels selfish on your tongue. Write down your worries, then leave them on the page, instead of carrying them into your dreams. Seneca wrote, "The mind must be given relaxation. It will rise improved and sharper after a pause." He knew that rest is not wasted time, it is sharpening time. The sword that never leaves its sheath grows dull. The mind that never rests grows heavy. So let me say this clearly. You are not broken. You are not weak. You are not beyond repair. You are tired, and tiredness is not permanent. It is a message, a whisper from your body, urging you to return what has been taken, to fill the well before it runs dry. Honor that whisper. Treat it not as a sentence of failure, but as proof of your humanity. Even the strongest warriors must rest between battles. Even the sharpest minds must pause to sharpen further. Fatigue is not the end of you. It is the signal that strength is waiting beneath the surface, ready to rise again when given the chance. Think of tomorrow morning. You wake after true rest. The storm that once clouded every thought looks different now. You see it not as evidence of your brokenness, but as proof of exhaustion. You realize you were never destroyed. You were only waiting to return to your strength. And that is the gift hidden inside weariness. It teaches you that resilience is not found in endless pushing, but in the wisdom to pause, to breathe, to recover. At this stage, hold this truth firmly. Fatigue will lie to you. It will tell you that you are finished, that you are failing, that you are not enough. But the lie collapses when you rest, because rest proves you are still here, still capable, still strong. So the next time you feel like you are breaking, stop. Ask yourself, am I broken or am I simply tired? More often than not, the answer will free you. And from here, we turn to the ninth and final law, the one that ties them all together. Because beyond fatigue, beyond storms of thought, beyond the hunger for approval, there lies a deeper truth. Your life is shaped not by chance, but by the discipline of choice. Entering the ninth chapter, let me begin with a confession. Most of the regret I've seen in people's lives did not come from what was done to them, but from how they reacted too quickly. A word spoken in anger, a door slammed in haste, a message sent before the truth had a chance to arrive. They treated their first emotion as truth, and it cost them dearly. Now imagine this. You send a message to a friend. Hours pass. No reply. The first emotion flares. They don't care about me. Suddenly the story grows teeth. Rejection, distance, betrayal. Yet the reality could be anything. Their phone died. They were in a meeting. They simply forgot. If you let that first emotion steer you, you risk burning a bridge over nothing but smoke. This is the trap. That first spark of feeling, anger, fear, jealousy, sadness, feels real because it is raw. But raw is not the same as wise. Like lightning in the dark, it can flash with intensity, even reveal something for a moment, but it distorts the whole landscape. If you build your decisions on it, you hand the steering wheel of your life to something volatile and unstable. Emotions arrive like sudden sparks, bright, blinding, and gone before you know it. But no wave lasts forever. If you stand your ground, if you wait, the sea always settles. What felt overwhelming in the moment reveals itself to be temporary. The Stoics understood this better than most. Epictetus taught the art of mastering impressions, the ability to witness what the mind presents without bowing to it as law. In practice, this meant creating a pause, a breath, a deliberate space between the first sensation and the next action. Marcus Aurelius echoed this discipline when he reminded himself, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." That power includes the choice not to be ruled by the first surge of emotion. Let me share a story. A man I knew once nearly lost his marriage over a single moment. His wife came home distracted, quieter than usual. His first emotion screamed, "She doesn't love me anymore." He snapped at her, accusing, wounded, ready to defend himself against an imagined betrayal. Hours later, he learned the truth. She was carrying grief from the sudden death of a colleague. His first emotion had lied. Had he trusted it fully, he would have destroyed trust with his own hands. That night became his turning point. He began practicing the pause, waiting before reacting, listening before assuming. It saved not just his marriage, but his peace. So here is the practice. When the first emotion strikes, whisper to yourself, "Let me wait before I react." Simple words, but they open space. Breathe once. Step back. Let the wave crash and pass. You will find that clarity often arrives in the silence left behind. Emotions are not commands, they are signals. Like notifications on your phone, they ask for attention but do not require obedience. You can read them, reflect on them, even learn from them, but you do not need to act on them instantly. This discipline can save more than your inner calm. It can preserve friendships, careers, even lives. Think of how many conflicts ignite not from what happened, but from how someone responded too fast, too raw, too unfiltered. A pause could have rewritten the story. The truth is, every warrior knows the danger of firing before aiming. The Stoic warrior knows the same danger lives within the mind, reacting before reflecting, trusting the first flash before wisdom has spoken. So the next time your chest tightens with anger, when jealousy claws at your ribs, when fear presses like a weight on your shoulders, remember, this is only the first wave. Stand still, let it break, watch the water return to calm. Because the mark of a Stoic is not that they feel nothing, but that they are not enslaved by the first thing they feel, and with that, the circle closes. You began this journey wrestling with negative thoughts, storms within, shadows without. Now you stand with 9 laws in your hand, not to erase the storms, but to walk through them steady, deliberate, unshakable. If this message gave you even a moment of clarity, let it be a reminder that you are never as powerless as your thoughts sometimes make you feel. A single spark of insight can grow into a fire strong enough to light your way through the darkest storm. Give this video a like so others who are wrestling with their own shadows may also find that spark. Take a moment to share your voice in the comments. Write the words, "Unbreakable Mind." Let it be both a reminder to yourself and a signal to others who are searching for strength. Your words may be the anchor someone else needs to hold on to. And if you are ready to keep walking this path with steady steps, subscribe and join us for the next lesson. Each law, each practice, is not just philosophy to think about, but a discipline to live by. Together, they sharpen the mind, steady the heart, and return us to the clarity we often forget we already hold. Carry this truth with you now. Your mind is not your enemy. It is your greatest weapon. Guard it, guide it, and grow it. The next storm will come, but you will meet it not as a victim, but as a warrior who cannot be shaken.